On December 15, 2009, in a seemingly serene Atlanta neighborhood, an unthinkable betrayal began to unfold. Angie Matthews, a stunning 38-year-old housewife, opened her front door to a familiar face, the teenage son of her next-door neighbor. What should have been an innocent visit quickly descended into a dangerous and illicit affair that would leave the community shaken to its core. By the time the truth surfaced, betrayal, passion, and rage had culminated in a brutal murder that no one saw coming. Angie Matthews appeared to have it all. Married to Marcus Matthews, a highly successful businessman, her life seemed like a picture-perfect fantasy. Their grand home, luxury cars, and extravagant lifestyle were envied by everyone. But beneath the glamorous exterior lay a void Angie couldn't ignore, a growing emptiness that wealth and status could never fill. With Marcus frequently away on business trips, Angie felt increasingly lonely, longing for the attention and passion that her marriage once had. Enter Jamal Thompson, the young teenage son of the family next door. At just 19 years old, Jamal was intelligent, charming, and full of youthful energy. Angie had watched him grow up from a mischievous boy into an alluring young man, and somewhere along the way, her innocent maternal admiration turned into something much darker. His playful smile, casual confidence, and magnetic personality awakened something in Angie she hadn't felt in years, a hunger for excitement, forbidden and dangerous. What began as casual conversations by the fence evolved into something far more dangerous. Lingering glances turned into subtle touches, and an unspoken tension simmered between them. Then, on that fateful December afternoon, while Marcus was away on another business trip, Jamal knocked on Angie's door under the guise of helping her fix a broken faucet. What started as an innocent interaction spiraled into a whirlwind of passion and reckless abandon. By the end of that day, the two had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Their affair became a tantalizing secret, a thrill neither could resist. Whenever Marcus left town, Angie and Jamal would meet in the privacy of her home, indulging in stolen moments that grew more intoxicating with each encounter. The danger of being discovered only heightened their desire. They told themselves they could keep their secret hidden, convinced that their calculated discretion was enough to outwit the prying eyes of their tight-knit neighborhood. But secrets like theirs don't stay buried forever. By February 2010, the affair had reached a fever pitch. Their passion had grown reckless, their meetings more brazen. They took greater risks, meeting even in broad daylight, all under the illusion of Marcus's prolonged business trips. That morning, Angie invited Jamal over as usual, believing she had the entire day to herself. Upstairs in her bedroom, the two lost themselves in their forbidden romance, blissfully unaware that their world was about to shatter. Meanwhile, Marcus Matthews was making his way home. His business meeting in Chicago had ended early, and he decided to surprise his wife with an unannounced visit. Pulling into the driveway at 2:45 p.m., Marcus noticed something unusual, a car parked just a little too close to his house. He brushed it off, eager to see Angie, and stepped inside the home. The house was eerily quiet. "Angie?" Marcus called out, his voice echoing through the halls. Upstairs, Angie froze, her heart pounding as she recognized her husband's voice. Panic gripped her like a vice. She and Jamal scrambled to cover their tracks, but it was too late. Marcus climbed the stairs, his gut churning with suspicion as he approached their bedroom door. What he found on the other side would ignite a chain of events more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. In that moment, the lies, the betrayal, and the festering rage erupted into unspeakable violence, leaving one person dead and a once idyllic neighborhood forever scarred. They were in the middle of their passionate embrace when disaster struck. Angie frantically pushed Jamal off the bed, her heart pounding like a drum. "You need to hide," she whispered sharply, her voice trembling with urgency. Jamal, half-dressed and visibly shaken, stumbled out of the bedroom, grabbing his clothes as he darted into the adjacent bathroom. Marcus, oblivious to the storm brewing behind the closed doors, made his way upstairs, calling Angie's name. Angie took a deep breath, forcing herself to appear calm. She straightened her robe, smoothed her hair, and plastered a shaky smile on her face before stepping into the hallway to meet her husband. "Hey, babe," she greeted him, her voice unnaturally bright. Marcus, clearly exhausted from his trip, smiled back. "I didn't mean to scare you. Just got back early." "Oh, I was just taking a nap," she lied, hoping he wouldn't notice the disarray in the bedroom behind her. To her immense relief, Marcus didn't press her for details. He leaned in to kiss her on the cheek, then mentioned needing a shower before heading to the bathroom. Angie's stomach dropped. Jamal was still hiding in there. But fate was on their side that day. Marcus stopped short of the door, muttering that he'd use the guest bathroom downstairs instead. The moment Marcus disappeared, Angie rushed to the bathroom and hissed for Jamal to leave. He slipped out the back door like a shadow, narrowly avoiding discovery. But the close call left them both shaken. That day should have been a wake-up call. Angie knew they were playing with fire, but the allure of their forbidden romance was impossible to resist. Despite the risks, the affair continued. They became more secretive, meeting at odd hours and devising new ways to keep their relationship hidden. The danger, the adrenaline, the rush, it was addictive. However, their luck was running out. By late February, their secret was on the verge of unraveling. Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly neighbor across the street, had always been the self-appointed watchwoman of the neighborhood. She noticed everything, and nothing escaped her sharp eyes. That afternoon, as she watered her plants, she saw Jamal sneaking into Angie's home. His nervous glances and hurried steps caught her attention. Suspicious, Mrs. Jenkins kept a close watch from her window. Later that evening, during her regular gossip session with another neighbor, she casually mentioned what she'd seen. In their tight-knit community, rumors spread like wildfire. It wasn't long before the whispers reached Patrice Thompson, Jamal's deeply religious mother. Alarmed by the scandalous talk about her son, she confronted him that night. "Jamal, what's this I'm hearing about you and Angela Matthews?" Patrice demanded, her tone sharp and accusing. Jamal, caught off guard, stumbled over his words. "Nothing, Ma. Mrs. Jenkins must be seeing things. There's nothing going on." But Patrice wasn't convinced. She could see the guilt in his eyes, hear the hesitation in his voice. The seed of doubt had been planted. Although she had no concrete proof, her instincts told her something wasn't right. Jamal, too, felt the walls closing in. The affair that once felt like an escape now felt like a noose tightening around his neck. Yet, even as the pressure mounted, neither he nor Angie could bring themselves to walk away. Their connection, once thrilling, had turned into a dangerous obsession. On the evening of March 5, 2010, the tension in the Matthews home reached its breaking point. Angie, consumed by guilt and fear, decided it was time to end the affair. She couldn't bear the weight of her lies any longer, nor could she ignore the risks. That night, she invited Jamal over, intending to break things off. But instead of the warm embrace he expected, Jamal was met with a cold and somber Angie. "We need to talk," she began, her voice low but steady. "If you found this story gripping, don't miss out on more shocking tales. Hit that subscribe button, stay updated, and be the first to uncover the secrets and drama that will leave you on the edge of your seat." Jamal immediately sensed something was wrong. "What's going on?" he asked, his brow furrowing. Angie took a deep breath. "We can't do this anymore, Jamal. It's too dangerous. I can't keep living like this." For a moment, Jamal stared at her in disbelief. "You're ending this? Just like that?" Angie nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm sorry, but it's for the best. We'll ruin our lives if we keep this up." Jamal's shock quickly turned to anger. "Ruin our lives? You mean your life, don't you? This was all about you, wasn't it? You used me." Angie flinched at his words. "It's not like that," she insisted. "I care about you, Jamal, but this has to stop." Jamal's voice rose, trembling with desperation. "You don't care about me. If you did, you wouldn't do this." As the argument escalated, Jamal's emotions spiraled out of control. The rejection, the betrayal, the shame, it all boiled over into rage. Angie tried to calm him down, but her words only seemed to fuel his anger. What happened next was a moment of pure chaos. The shouting caught the attention of Marcus, who had returned home earlier than expected. Hearing the commotion upstairs, he rushed to the bedroom, throwing open the door. What he saw, a half-dressed Jamal and his tearful wife, was more than he could process. The confrontation that followed would end in bloodshed, leaving one person dead and a neighborhood forever haunted by the tragic events of that night. "It's over, Jamal. You need to leave." Angie's voice trembled as she tried to sound firm, but Jamal wasn't listening. The room was charged with tension, their argument escalating at a dangerous pace. Jamal, feeling cornered, rejected, and betrayed, lashed out in desperation. "You can't just throw me away like this, Angie," he yelled, his voice cracking with emotion. "I said it's over." Angie repeated, her own frustration boiling over. Jamal's eyes burned with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. He reached out and grabbed her arm, pulling her closer as he pleaded with her to reconsider. But Angie wasn't having it. She yanked her arm free, her voice rising in panic. "You need to leave, now." The confrontation took a dark turn. In a fit of rage, Jamal shoved Angie away from him, his emotions spiraling out of control. Angie stumbled backward, her eyes widening in terror as her foot slipped near the edge of the staircase. What happened next unfolded in a horrifying blur. Jamal instinctively reached out to grab her, but it was too late. Angie lost her footing and toppled backward, her body tumbling violently down the staircase. Time seemed to slow as Jamal watched in horror, frozen in place. When her body came to a stop at the bottom of the stairs, the house fell into an eerie silence. Angie lay motionless, her neck twisted at an unnatural angle, her eyes staring lifelessly at the ceiling. The fall had been fatal. Jamal stood at the top of the stairs, paralyzed by the realization of what had just happened. His heart pounded as panic set in. He rushed down the stairs, calling Angie's name, but she didn't respond. He knelt beside her, his hands trembling as he shook her shoulders, desperate for any sign of life. But Angie was gone. The gravity of his actions hit him like a freight train. Terrified, Jamal bolted from the house, leaving Angie's lifeless body where it lay. He ran back to his own home, his mind a chaotic storm of fear, regret, and disbelief. What had he done? He hadn't meant for this to happen, but now the woman he claimed to love was dead, and his life was in ruins. The next morning, on March 6, 2010, Marcus Matthews returned home from yet another business trip, expecting to find Angie waiting for him with her usual warm smile. Instead, he was greeted by an unsettling silence. "Angie," he called out, his voice echoing through the empty house. The quiet felt oppressive as Marcus moved from room to room, a growing sense of dread settling in his chest. Something wasn't right. When he reached the bottom of the staircase, his worst fears were realized. There she was, Angie's body, lying motionless at the foot of the stairs. Her limbs were splayed at unnatural angles, and the sight of her lifeless eyes sent a chill down Marcus's spine. "No, no, no, no!" Marcus cried out, rushing to her side. His hands shook as he checked for a pulse, but her skin was cold, and he knew she was gone. Frantically, he dialed 911, his voice breaking as he tried to explain what he had found. Minutes later, the house was swarming with police and paramedics, but their efforts were futile. Angie was pronounced dead at the scene. Among the chaos, Detective Bryant arrived. A seasoned investigator with a sharp eye for detail, Bryant immediately noticed that something about the scene felt off. The way Angie's body was positioned, the severity of her injuries, it all seemed too violent, too deliberate, to be a simple accident. By March 8, the investigation was in full swing. Marcus was the first to be questioned. Heartbroken and visibly shaken, he recounted his last conversations with Angie, describing her as happy and vibrant. He couldn't fathom how this could have happened. "Was there any trouble in your marriage?" Detective Bryant asked. "No," Marcus insisted. "We had our ups and downs like anyone else, but I loved my wife. I'd never hurt her." Meanwhile, officers canvassed the neighborhood, speaking to anyone who might have seen or heard anything unusual. It wasn't long before they reached Mrs. Jenkins, the neighborhood's unofficial gossip queen. She didn't hesitate to share what she knew. "I've seen that young boy, Jamal, going into Angie's house more times than I can count," she said, her voice dripping with suspicion. "Always when Marcus was out of town. It's not my place to say, but, well, it didn't look right." This revelation caught Detective Bryant's attention. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. On March 12, Jamal was brought in for questioning. Nervous and fidgety, he tried to maintain his composure, but the pressure was evident. "Where were you on the night of March 5th? Bryant asked, his tone calm but firm. Jamal hesitated before responding. I was at home." But his story didn't add up. His alibi was shaky, and his nervous demeanor only deepened Bryant's suspicions. "I find it interesting," Bryant said, leaning forward, "that multiple witnesses have placed you at the Matthews home. Care to explain?" Jamal stammered, his confidence crumbling under the weight of the interrogation. "I didn't. I mean, I wasn't there that night." Bryant wasn't convinced. His instincts told him that Jamal was hiding something, and he was determined to uncover the truth. As the walls closed in around Jamal, the secrets of the affair unraveled, setting the stage for a shocking revelation that would rock the entire community. Jamal Thompson sat in the cold, sterile interrogation room, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill in the air. Detective Bryant, with his piercing gaze, leaned forward, his voice calm yet unrelenting. "Jamal, the evidence doesn't lie. We have your fingerprints in the house and text messages between you and Angie. We know what happened that night." Jamal's heart sank. He had hoped, prayed, that somehow, they wouldn't find anything. But now, with the evidence laid bare, he felt the noose tightening around him. His silence was deafening, and Detective Bryant knew he was close to breaking. On March 20, 2010, the investigation took a decisive turn. The forensic team had uncovered key pieces of evidence that pieced together the chilling events of Angie's final moments. Jamal's fingerprints were found not only on the stair railing but also on Angie's arm, evidence of a struggle. But the most damning discovery came from Angie's phone. The recovered text messages painted a vivid picture of a clandestine affair spiraling out of control. In their final exchange, Angie had told Jamal that their relationship was over. His response, filled with desperation and anger, hinted at the confrontation that would lead to her death. With this evidence in hand, the police moved quickly. On the afternoon of March 20, Jamal was arrested at his home. His mother, Patrice Thompson, watched helplessly as her son was handcuffed and led away. Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded with the officers, but their determination was unshakable. As Jamal sat in the back of the squad car, the weight of his actions came crashing down. The affair that had once been thrilling and intoxicating had now become his undoing. Angie was dead, her husband Marcus was left to grieve, and Jamal faced a future defined by the bars of a prison cell. News of Jamal's arrest spread like wildfire through the Atlanta neighborhood. The whispers that had begun months earlier now erupted into full-blown gossip. Neighbors speculated about the details of the affair and the tragic events that had unfolded. Mrs. Jenkins, the neighborhood's self-appointed watchdog, was quick to share her thoughts. "I knew something wasn't right from the start," she told reporters. "I saw that boy sneaking into Angie's house when her husband wasn't home. I told people, but nobody wanted to believe me." The Matthews-Thompson scandal became the talk of the city, a salacious story of forbidden love, betrayal, and murder. By April 15, 2010, the case was ready for trial, and the courtroom was packed with spectators eager to witness the drama firsthand. Assistant District Attorney Carla Henderson, known for her tenacity, led the prosecution. In her opening statement, she painted a grim picture of a young man consumed by jealousy and anger. "This is not just a case of an affair gone wrong," Henderson declared. "This is about a young man who, in a moment of rage, caused the brutal death of a woman he claimed to love." She laid out the evidence methodically: Jamal's fingerprints, the bruises on Angie's arms, and the text messages that documented the unraveling of their relationship. Each piece built a damning case against Jamal, leaving little room for doubt. The trial's second week brought a parade of witnesses. Mrs. Jenkins testified first, recounting her observations of Jamal's late-night visits to Angie's home. Her testimony was a key piece in establishing the affair's timeline. Next was Marcus Matthews. He took the stand on April 18, his grief palpable. His voice trembled as he described the day he found Angie's lifeless body. "I loved my wife," Marcus said, tears streaming down his face. "We had our problems, but I never imagined something like this could happen." He admitted that he had been distant, focused on his career, and unaware of Angie's affair. His testimony painted a picture of a man blindsided by betrayal and loss. Jamal's attorney, Jonathan Reed, argued that the events leading to Angie's death were a tragic accident, not murder. He described Jamal as a young man caught up in emotions he couldn't handle. "Jamal made a mistake," Reed told the jury. "But this was not premeditated. This was not murder. This was a moment of passion and confusion that spiraled out of control." To support his argument, Reed called Patrice Thompson to the stand on April 20. Patrice, a proud and stoic woman, broke down as she pleaded with the jury to see her son's humanity. "He's not a monster," Patrice said through tears. "He's a good boy who got caught up in something he didn't fully understand." On April 30, 2010, after weeks of emotional testimony and heated arguments, the jury reached a verdict. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the decision: guilty of second-degree murder. Gasps filled the room as Jamal lowered his head, tears streaming down his face. Patrice sobbed openly, clutching her chest as the weight of the verdict sank in. Jamal was sentenced to 20 years in prison. The affair that had started as a secret thrill ended in heartbreak, scandal, and a brutal murder that left a community forever changed. As the trial reached its final stages, the defense team made their closing argument, attempting to sway the jury with a narrative of tragedy rather than malicious intent. Jonathan Reed, Jamal's attorney, argued vehemently that Angie's death was a horrible accident, not a premeditated act of violence. "Jamal never meant to harm Angie," Reed declared, his voice filled with sincerity. "What happened that night was the result of a heated argument spiraling out of control. He tried to stop her from falling. He tried to save her. This was not murder, it was a tragic accident, an unfortunate chain of events that no one could have predicted." Reed's words seemed to strike a chord with some members of the jury, but the prosecution wasn't moved. Assistant District Attorney Carla Henderson stood firm, delivering her rebuttal with unshakable conviction. "This wasn't an accident. This was a crime of passion," she argued, her voice growing more intense. "The evidence speaks for itself: Jamal's fingerprints on the stair railing, the bruising on Angie's arms from the struggle, the text messages filled with rage and desperation. This was not some tragic fall, it was the violent climax of a forbidden affair that spiraled out of control. He let his jealousy and frustration drive him to a point where he no longer saw Angie as a person, but as an obstacle to his desires." The courtroom was thick with tension as both sides rested their case. The jury deliberated for several days, carefully weighing the evidence and the emotional testimony from both the defense and the prosecution. The trial had exposed every corner of Jamal and Angie's affair, from their secret rendezvous to the destructive argument that led to her death. On May 10, 2010, the courtroom was brimming with anticipation as the jury filed back into the room. Jamal sat at the defense table, his hands trembling in his lap, his gaze fixed on the floor. The room fell silent as the judge called the court to order. After what felt like an eternity, the jury foreman stood and read the verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant, Jamal Thompson, guilty of involuntary manslaughter. A collective gasp swept through the room. The charge was a lesser one than second-degree murder, but it was still a significant blow. Jamal's face went pale as the weight of the verdict sank in. Involuntary manslaughter carried a prison sentence, though less severe than what he had initially faced. As the judge sentenced him to 15 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years, Patrice Thompson, sitting in the front row, broke down in uncontrollable sobs. Her cries echoed through the courtroom as she clutched her hands to her chest, unable to fully comprehend the reality of what had just happened. Jamal, shackled and defeated, hung his head. The tears that had once been filled with passion and longing were now replaced with guilt and regret. His future was uncertain, and the man who had once been full of hope and ambition now faced a lifetime of uncertainty and remorse. The devastation of the trial extended far beyond the courtroom. For Marcus Matthews, the pain of losing his wife in such a brutal and senseless way was more than he could bear. On June 5, 2010, he made the difficult decision to sell the house where he and Angie had built their lives together. The memories of their time there, once full of love and laughter, had now become suffocating reminders of everything he had lost. The house, once a sanctuary, had become a tomb of painful recollections. Marcus packed his belongings, preparing to leave the neighborhood that had once felt like home. Everywhere he went, the whispers followed him, the pitying glances and quiet conversations behind his back. He could no longer bear to live in the same community where his wife's affair and tragic death had turned his life upside down. He needed to escape, to find somewhere where he wasn't constantly reminded of the terrible fate that had befallen him. For Patrice Thompson, the effects of the trial and Jamal's imprisonment were equally devastating. Her once proud and respected position in the community had been shattered. Neighbors who had once welcomed her with open arms now avoided eye contact, unsure of how to respond. The gossip that had plagued her family since the news of Jamal and Angie's affair had become a permanent scar on her life. Her friends and acquaintances no longer spoke to her, and she became more and more isolated, retreating into the privacy of her home. Patrice's world had become a silent, broken place. The weight of Jamal's actions had crushed her spirit, leaving her with a heart heavy with grief. The vibrant, close-knit community she had once known was now fractured, torn apart by the scandal and the painful loss of both her son and the respect she had once commanded. The Matthews-Thompson case had left the entire neighborhood in turmoil. What had started as a secret, thrilling affair between Angie and Jamal had spiraled into a deadly obsession, one that had claimed a life and ruined many others. The community, which had once been close-knit and supportive, was now a place of whispers, judgment, and shattered reputations. The affair that had ignited passions behind closed doors had now ignited a firestorm of gossip and scandal that everyone wished they could forget, but none of them could escape. And yet, even as the neighborhood continued to rebuild and move on, there was a lingering question that haunted everyone: how far would someone go when they were driven by jealousy and desire? If you found this story gripping, don't miss out on more shocking tales. Hit that subscribe button, stay updated, and be the first to uncover the secrets and drama that will leave you on the edge of your seat.